Struggling to decorate your Minecraft gardens and find that you're low on inspiration? Well, you're on the right video, as in this mini series of 3 episodes, I'm going to show you 3 ways to design your garden. I'll be using the same area and same building to show you how we can make the most of the space we've got, but to give you a beautiful result every time. Today we'll delve into the world of cottagecore and base our garden on one that would belong to a traditional English cottage. Made up from a mix of pretty flowers in a picnic area and a greenhouse and raised beds for planting your own crops, this front yard is a gardener's dream. As a warning, this build does contain a heavier use of CIT packs for decorating, so please do bear that in mind if you don't use them. Let's begin by making a path with gravel as the chosen block. And as the layout of this garden will include 2 separate areas, let's make a straight path down from the door to the garden entrance. Whilst this is a cottage garden, I still want there to be some solid structure with the main path, so we're actually just going to make it completely straight and going 3 wide to line up with the stairs by the door. Depending on the size of your front door section, or if you'd like your path a different width, you can adjust the measurements to fit with your build. Now let's figure out where we want the entrance to our crops and gardening area. Creating this close to the house means that we have the opportunity to make a nice walkway along the lower part of the path. I don't want the path to the seating area to be directly opposite the one we've just made, so why don't we move it down a few blocks to make it more interesting? To the right of the house, which is where our seating area will be, start planning out your bed. We're going to have beds along either side of the path, one filled with flowers and grasses and one with just hedges. Much like in the fairy core garden video, begin filling in with a mixture of coarse dirt and moss blocks, ready for when we plant our flowers. Ideally, we want our beds to remain straight along the path side as we're going to add some borders later on, but you can place blocks a little more randomly on the other side of the bed. When you're happy with that bed, make another smaller one on the opposite side where our gardening area will be. This side will be filled with just hedges. Let's make some beds right next to the house on both sides. Like before, follow the straightness of the path on one side, but feel free to make it look a little less uniform on the other. If you're happy with the layout of everything so far, move on to adding some dark leaf blocks on the left side of the path. Using leaf blocks helps to give the illusion of a hedge. Build your hedges up by a couple of blocks to give that area a bit of privacy and to really help separate it from the rest of the garden. Do the same for the bed by the house, and if you need to, extend your beds or hedges outwards a little bit like I do going forward. On the opposite side of the path, let's now begin to fill in our flower bed. I've not gone crazy with flower choices, instead just picking 4 or 5 flowers that I want to use across the whole build. You can use whichever flowers you want, but for a list of what I've used here, I've used peonies, purple hyacinths and oxeye daisies. Of course, I've mixed these in with leaf blocks for more fullness towards the back of the bed, and tall and normal grass and ferns. If you've watched the first video in this series, in which we designed a fairy core garden, you may remember me advising you to have smaller plants at the front and the sides and taller, bushier plants towards the back of the beds. This just adds height and also helps to showcase all of the flowers that you've chosen for your beds, and I'd strongly advise following that for today's build. Now, fill in the other flower bed by the house and experiment with heights and colours. You can create some really gorgeous builds with a good mix of greenery, and I use Ikuyuk's Botanical collection pack to retexture my flowers, which I think makes them look a lot prettier than the standard game ones. Let's just add some really simple straight flower beds around the house now. I want the illusion of box hedges, so I'm not having my leaf blocks any taller than 1 block high. I'm also adding in either tall ferns or tall grass here and there to break up the leaf blocks a little bit. Unlike the fairy core garden, where we wanted our beds to look a little more wilder and more natural, I want this garden to look like it's frequently maintained and that the beds around the house were kept straight for design purposes. If you'd rather have yours like they were in the fairy core video though, where there was no structure with the beds, please do feel free to do that. It's just personal preference at this point. In a space of your choosing on the left side of the build, let's start making a greenhouse with glass blocks and polished and normal granite blocks. The side walls are 5 blocks long and the back and front are 6 blocks, but you can make yours bigger or smaller to suit your garden space. As I've nestled my greenhouse between some trees and grass, you may see me making some small changes to the surrounding environment just so it fits in better. I start by adding 2 glass blocks on top of the granite base, making it 3 tall in total. I then place down a floor, in this case birch planks to make the space appear lighter, to get a proper feel for the size of the structure before adding another block on each side of the front wall. Leave 2 blocks open to create the door space. It's up to you what sort of roof you'd like on your greenhouse, but I always like to create a sloped roof as I feel that it's more true to life. To do this, you just want to increase the height of the roof by 1 block every time. The height at the sides of the greenhouse will be 3 blocks tall, including the base block. The next blocks on either side are 4 tall, and the middle 2 blocks are 5 tall. Now, unfortunately, I must have had my recording on pause as it didn't catch me doing the inside of the greenhouse and finishing up the outside, but I've just created raised beds with coarse dirt and birch trapdoors and added some plants from Mizuno CIT and the Yuushya mod. I also placed some ivy on the front of the structure too. Moving on to the outside of the greenhouse, let's add a little path made from cobblestone and mossy cobblestone. I add in some dirt paths a little later on too, just to make it look like it's a frequently walked over area. I'm not making my path too wide as we're going to add in some small beds either side of the path, but depending on how big you've made your greenhouse, you may want to make yours a little wider. So I've already dug out and filled in my beds next to the greenhouse, again with the moss and coarse dirt mix, and I've placed down some more leaf blocks as hedges to help fill some of the space. I'm now just finishing my bed with ferns, grasses, purple hyacinths again, and introducing some daffodils to the mix. In another area by the greenhouse, grab your coarse dirt and start placing them down to create your planters where we'll grow some crops. I originally had mine 2 blocks apart, but I changed it to 3 so I can add a dirt path down the middle later on. Also, bear in mind that you'll need at least 2 blocks between them anyway, as you're going to add trapdoors around the dirt. As I've gone for birchwood in the greenhouse, I'm going to stick with that theme for the raised beds and place down birch trapdoors all the way around the planters. The colour choice is up to you though, and also is dependent on what colour scheme you chose for your greenhouse. I've just planted some strawberries in one of my raised beds. These are from a pack called Strawberry Bushes, which turns sweet berries to strawberries. And I also had non-edible blueberry bush CITs on the other planter, but I do swap these out later on for beetroot. If you have the space, why don't you add in another planter to grow more veg? Potatoes are a good choice, and they're not only extremely tasty in real life, but also have a really pretty flower when they grow. Once again, cover up the sides of your coarse dirt with trapdoors and get planting. Off camera, I've placed down a few CITs just to help the build come to life. I especially love this little archway from Ghoulcraft, which leads you to the greenhouse area. We're finally done with the first area of this garden, so let's now head over to the opposite side, where we want to create a little patioed area for somewhere to sit. I'm just randomly digging out some blocks until I'm happy with how it looks. You can choose blocks to suit your taste, but I'm actually just going to use a mix of cobblestone and mossy cobblestone again for that area. I do then just add in some dirt path blocks and moss carpet for texture and added detail. Let's add in some seats now. I've gone for a picnic table from Ghoulcraft with a barrier block underneath so I can place an item on the table, but you can make a really nice table and chairs just using blocks if you don't use resource packs. If you are using CITs, experiment and have fun with where you place your items. It usually takes me a few tries to try and find a good place for an item to go. If you want to incorporate more greenery around the patio, why don't you extend your bed out a little further? Let's make it so we have a small amount of flowers and greenery wrapping around the picnic area. I'm just reusing the flowers from the original bed, which again are peonies and oxeye daisies. Off camera, I've quickly extended the pre-existing pond ever so slightly, and I've just added some reeds around it. I'm now just making a dirt path which is going to lead around the side of the house to another little area. If you've got the extra space, some beehives would be a great item to add in so you can collect honey. Let's use some gravel as the flooring this time. And what's nice about the Mizuno's texture pack is that the gravel spills over onto the next block, making it look more realistic. You could of course continue with the same blocks as your patio though. Let's now add in a simple backdrop of dark oak leaves to surround the area and help close it off a little from the surrounding environment. I'm actually just using some CIT beehives, but if you wanted gameplay with this garden, you could make some real ones to keep your bees in. I have added a beehive to the tree though, and a honey jar or two on the floor, which is a nice little detail. The next thing we're going to do is place some of these white picket borders around our beds. It can be a bit of a lengthy, tedious task, so I won't show the whole process, but they look great placed along every flower bed. They're from Garden Breeze and they are a small item, but they make such a big impact on the garden. Having these around the flower beds really helps to finish off the build, especially on the beds either side of the main path. There are brick variants too, which I've used in other builds, and they also look beautiful, but I've chosen the white picket ones today as they tie in with the birch colours and they feel very cottagey. I also added a few patches of grass here and there off camera and some small CITs on the main path. Now let's have a look at our finished garden. To help create an interesting layout to our cottage garden, we've made a gravel path that splits off into 2 different sections of the build. We've kept one side a little more private, separated by a high hedge, but we've created a dreamy cottagecore walkway into that area by adding a lattice archway to open up the space. We've built some raised planters that are ideal for growing all kinds of crops, varying from strawberries to beetroot. As well as being a good space to plant, they also provide the area with some taller, interesting features. Fronted by simple yet pretty flower beds, we've made a greenhouse which is the most perfect space to grow exotic plants that may need more sun and a warmer environment. The next part of our garden is surrounded by more flower beds, giving the illusion of a wildflower area which thrives in the spring and summer seasons. We've made a tiny stone patio for a picnic bench, which is the perfect place to sit and relax after a long, sunny afternoon of gardening. A small path to the side of the house leads us to a cozy little apiary, providing us with another space to be self-sufficient. I hope you've been able to take away some cottagecore inspo from this build and create a gorgeous garden space for your house. Thanks for watching, and keep your eyes peeled for the last part of this garden series coming very soon. See you next time.